Welcome to another Sunday. Thank you for joining me. Let's see. I'm going to start out with, you never know what I'm going to talk about, right? And neither do I, but I do put these presentations together with a general theme, and please forgive me if they take a side trip someplace and end up in places where you weren't expecting them to be, according to the title of what I'm supposed to be talking about. Looking upon the world situation with chagrin. There's a good English word, chagrin, at the crazy and odd behavior of my fellow human beings on planet Earth. And recently, for some reason, finding myself more and more involved in researching our fellow human beings who actually went extinct, the Neanderthals, which, the Neanderthals were stockier and bulkier and thicker brains, but larger brains, thicker skulls and larger brains, and had blonde hair and blue eyes. So anybody who's got blue eyes, that means that you've got Neanderthal genes in you. Now, back in my day, the Neanderthals were sort of a word that you used to denigrate someone. There's another cool word, denigrate. It means put somebody down because they're a Neanderthal. When in fact, the more we discover about the Neanderthals, the more we realize that they had, even though they did travel, they followed the herds, they hunted, they generally lived in caves, they didn't build structures for themselves, but they did cave wall art. They painted themselves with designs and symbols. It's still unsure whether they did tattooing or not at that time, but they did make jewelry, they made clothing, they buried their dead, they had ceremonies, they cooked their food. They were predominantly meat eaters because they had migrated to Europe during the Ice Age, so that they were in a heavy-duty sort of Siberian environment. There wasn't a lot of, plant life to eat there, except perhaps in the dead of summer. The reason I bring you all this up is because there's no guarantee that human beings are going to survive. The dinosaurs didn't, and they were like 50 times larger than we were. They dominated and ruled the earth for millions of years. Human beings have only been here for a few thousand. We've been here for about 100,000 years. We've been in our present form 30,000 years, perhaps even up to 100,000 years, depending on how far back in evolution you have to look before we don't look human anymore. But here was another strain of humanity, the Neanderthals, with different DNA than we have, who were not directly related to us as a humanoid species, and they went completely extinct. The greatest empires on earth have gone extinct. Rome, which governed 2/3 of the planet at one point and had the most powerful army in the world, went under. So when I look upon the present world and realize that someplace inside of me, I assume that of course we're going to make it because we're the most advanced civilization on the planet and we've figured things out before. I hate to be pessimistic. I'm not being pessimistic, I'm being realistic, that we are charged with a duty to save ourselves. Nobody else is going to do it. And it's not granted by great nature that we get a free pass out of the mess that we've gotten ourselves in. It's up to us to do something. And like I said before in one of the previous broadcasts, if not me, who? And if not now, when? Every day that we delay on standing up for the truth and standing up for the true cosmic principles of what is good in the world and what is empathic and what is filled with love and companionship and peace. We have the power to elevate ourselves out of the animalistic struggle for raw survival that all of our ancestors have had to do, and create a world where there is true peace among brothers and sisters of our species and all other species on the planet. We could become true high-level spiritual stewards of life on Earth if we choose to. And it's those kind of ideas of what we're here to accomplish if we choose to that these live streams are truly all about. That I believe that at the very time that the Earth is heading towards the cliff as far as politics and war and corporate greed and corruption in every aspect of society that you can think of, as soon as money is involved, humans are corrupted. People all over the world are the same. Everybody's essentially the same. Different languages, different cultures. So what? At the core of it is a certain level of comfort and safety and survivability for myself and my children and my relatives and my friends and my community. All of us want peace and safety and friendship and love and brotherhood. But as soon as governing bodies get involved and money is involved, then human beings become corrupted. And then those of us out here in the world as, quote, regular people who want those things I just talked about don't have the ability to get those things because we are controlled by bad guys, so to speak, who've stolen our world from us and rule us in ways that we actually have the ability to change if we wish to. And in this case, in the most potent way that you can possibly imagine, dished up to us by great nature itself. That our consciousness itself is what is creating all of this at a subterranean zone in the deepest part of our collective unconscious mind, close to what scientists now call the quantum energy field. The vacuum is not empty. It's filled with titanic forces of energy boiling in what is known as quantum foam. And out of that boiling nexus of unbelievable power and energy that drives the whole universe is the source of energy of me being alive and being conscious. And we can tap into that energy and do anything. We could create any kind of world we want if we're aligned properly. And that's the idea behind the present period of time when we're in such dire straits that it's sort of, technology to the rescue with high-tech sound devices. In my case, high-tech sound devices, sound delivered to precision that's never been possible in humanity before. Brainwave entrainment to exact states of consciousness that we know get the job done. Synchronicity of the hemispheres, where we know the brain goes when the aha door opens with direct communication to inspiration from the universe itself. And we can align our brains together to participate in that activity precisely tuned together in a way that only the 21st century could make happen. And so the soundtrack at the end of each one of these live streams is an attempt to create a scientific experiment, if you will, to see if we can make what we know is possible from a scientific level of the quantum field and from the ancient level of, say, the sutras of Patanjali and the Upanishads that say the same thing, that if we get together and we align ourselves together in our consciousness and open our hearts, we can communicate to the universe, and the universe will listen to us and change things. So we do have the possibility of changing the world. And human beings have been attempting to do this since the beginning of time. And the primary way that human beings have always been trying to do this is with the use of sound. Sound has stood the test of time as the primary, number one, most powerful tool that humans have ever come up with to change reality, change consciousness, call upon the gods, so to speak, and align ourselves with the universe in ways that we can form a symbiotic partnership with the universe itself to recreate the world and polish it in a way that it could be heaven on earth, so to speak. But just in case, I bought this book. Look at this thing. Right? It's called The Book, The Ultimate Guide to Rebuilding Civilization, just in case we don't make it. So this book has got like chapter 1. Down to the basics here. Chapter 1, Making Fire. Chapter 2, Finding Water. Chapter 3, Building a Shelter. Chapter 4, How to Search for Plants to Eat, How to Make Traps, How to do this stuff. Then later, as the book goes on, how to make a printing press, how to make a weaving loom, how to make your own clothes, how to garden, how to build a telescope, how to build a radio. I mean, it's interesting. Rebuilding civilization from the scratch in case we poop out and don't make it. So my call to action here is let's make it not necessary to have that book, but let's remake reality together in a vision of reality that is the deep heart's desire of all people, the basic foundations that we wish and long for in a life of peace and harmony with the universe and with each other. That being said, let's talk about this powerful force that humanity has used since the beginning of time, as we explore the idea, the concept of sound medicine. Now, we have to realize that the word medicine, has only most recently been co-opted by the modern pharmaceutical/medical profession to mean pills that you buy. Medicine is now prescription medications that you take. That's what medicine has been redefined as in our culture and society. But in reality, medicine has always, throughout all of history, stood for a holistic healing technique or process. So it could be plant medicine and herbal medicine and sound medicine and light medicine and energy medicine. I'm reclaiming the word to not mean pills given by somebody in a white lab coat who's essentially a salesman for some pharmaceutical industry who does not have your best interests in mind, whose bottom line is profits like any other corporation in the world, maximizing profits, and it doesn't matter who gets hurt. There's statistics involved, number crunching involved, collateral damage that's acceptable or not, playing up to the line of lawsuits, already figuring out how much lawsuits are going to cost and figuring that into expenses going forward anyhow. Meantime, that same industry controls the textbooks and the licensing procedures and the curriculum of medical schools. So essentially medical schools become propaganda farms for a certain point of view of health and disease that involves patching people up with pills so you can't feel the symptoms, surgeries to cut things out when we can't figure out what to do anymore with pills, and bad-mouthing any kind of competition that is not you. Any kind of holistic approach is looked upon as quackery or pseudoscience, and the charge of pseudoscience is always related to the fact, well, you don't have any research, you don't have double-blind studies, you don't have any, big projects that have proven what you're saying is so. Meantime, the research dollars for you to do that is blocked and withheld by the very guys who are pointing the finger at you that you are a pseudoscience. They are the ones who hold those dollars back from the holistic professions to do true studies with the same level of money and facilities that the modern medical system gets to use, that we don't get to use those. Therefore, we flounder about and do the best we can. And many of us, like me, spend huge amounts of our own money to fund our own research because we're driven. Reclaiming the word medicine as sound medicine, vibrational medicine, because essentially sound is one form of vibrational medicine. Light fields, photons also vibrate, so that's vibrational medicine. Electromagnetic fields vibrate, that's vibrational medicine. Consciousness itself vibrates, so energy medicine is vibrational medicine. Right now we're going to be talking about the sound vibrational portion of medicine. As far back as you can think, as far back in humanity as you can go, we have used sound. The early Neolithic healing temples, look at these places that were built with gigantic stones by our Neolithic ancestors. Caves that went down under the ground. I mean, the ancients used sound to heal. The hypogeum of Hal Saflieni, Neolithic subterranean structure dating to the Saflian phase, like 3,300 years before Christ. Right now, Christ, 2,500 years, or 2,400 years. So it's 3,300 years before that. That's like 6,000 years ago in Malta. The room, the temple called the oracle chamber, designed to vibrate at 111 hertz, which scientists today in the 21st century now know kills cancer cells, using the power of the 11th harmonic. I need a whole live stream on talking about that kind of stuff, but there was a TEDx talk by a scientist who showed, microscope movies of blasting cancer cells with 111 hertz, and you can watch them explode. So, these guys knew this 6,000 years ago. How did they know that? And they built a room that resonates that frequency. We, we think that people got stupid, that we're stupider in the past. And it may be that we're getting stupider as we go on because we're losing all this stuff. And then we have to rediscover it. And the people that rediscover it are poo-pooed as quacks. The Egyptians had whole temples of healing with similar sacred geometric architectural designs to create resonance chambers and certain frequencies that raised consciousness, that were used for healing. Music has always been a part of every culture. The instruments from the ancient past that we've found were never just for entertainment. Music was always something that was used with a spiritual content, with a sacred underpinning. Sound and music were never frivolous. It was always for some big purpose that was powerful and unique and passed down from healer to healer, from healer to shaman, from nature to shaman to people. Instruments and flutes and powerful medicines from the jungles and the forest, where there was always chanting and drumming, and even rattles could, shaken at a certain brainwave speed, would cause entrainment. Drumming, the research that I've done into shamanic drumming, the standard drumming speed is around 5 hertz. That's a theta brainwave entrainment frequency that puts you into sort of a trance-like dream state. That's the shamanic journey, a journey where you don't know you're here. You're in some kind of vision quest state. Through brainwave entrainment, that was all derived intuitively by pounding at a drum at a certain speed that put you yourself, who's drumming, into this state where you know that anybody who listens to it is going to go to the same state. In every culture, in Asia, shakuhachi flute, bamboo flutes, all kinds of different stringed instruments, and song and dance and chant. Pythagoras, in his school in off the island, of this little island of Samos, discovered profound relationships between sound frequency relationships to each other that form chords, the raw beginnings of music theory, a definite relationship between the vibrational frequencies and their ratios to each other, and three-dimensional spaces, sacred architecture, the mathematics that govern the basic primordial shapes that later were elucidated by Plato, the 5 Platonic solids, all related to music and music theory. It was Pythagoras who invented the sacred monochord that had a single string. This is a monochord right here, and it had sort of a ruler on the side with a sliding bridge. So if you go directly to the midpoint and you put the bridge there and you pluck either one of these 2 strings, they are exactly twice the vibrational frequency as the open string with no bridge here. That's mathematics. That's ratios of 1 to 2, or 2 to 3, or 3 to 4, or 4 to 5. Those are harmonics. That's the basis of music theory, chord structures. The basis of my piano back there. It's like the basis of relationship between frequencies in ratios that are mathematical to each other form pleasing vibrational, the fit of the vibrational frequencies of the waves of the sound fit together mathematically, and we consider that to be pleasing. Call it a chord. When they don't fit nicely, they bump into each other in discordant ways. Those are discordant frequencies. So, for instance, if I go back to this piano, middle A. Octave of A. And if I hit two notes that are mathematically related to each other, it's a chord. But discordant, two notes right next to each other. Create discordant relationships to each other, which cause something to happen. Essentially, when all your organs and glands and biochemistry and meridians are in harmony with each other, your body is playing a chord that's in tune. And when things start to drift and they're not in tune with each other because master control is disengaged in a fight or flight response, nobody's home managing the store, and all of these different tuned organs and glands begin to drift from each other, we start getting discords just like that. Those discords cause pain, cause symptoms, make me sick. Retuning the organism back into a harmonious state with sound. Right? The advanced form in the 21st century, this concept of biotuning, where we can hook you up to a monitor, and we can look inside of that master control system and see it on a computer screen and see that it's imbalanced. Therefore, we know it's not minding the store. We know that all your systems are drifting. We know that discordant frequencies are arising. We know that you've got symptoms, you've got problems. And by collapsing that stress with a precisely tuned sound frequency, and bringing the control system back online that now looks out on all of the instruments in the orchestra out of tune with each other and brings them back over time, those symptoms reverse themselves and everything returns to the way it should be, which is why scientists and even the medical profession itself worldwide recognizes that stress is the ultimate cause of disease. Stress, disengaging the master control into a fight or flight response, is the cause of disease. Figuring out a way to bring it back and to hold it there and to exercise it to get stronger to be there is what the sound technique that I came up with, biotuning. But human beings have been using sound frequencies to resonate different parts of the body back to time immemorable. Resonating frequencies for the liver or for the kidneys or for a bone that's broken or a pain in the shoulder. Pythagoras extrapolated all of that into this whole concept that one string divided mathematically to different lengths cause harmonious relationships between a string plucked on one side and the other of each of these divisions, which essentially formed music. A, B, C, D, E, F, G, A sharp and B sharp and C sharp and all that. But he extrapolated that further and saw that this also seemed to be the harmonious mathematical relationship between planetary orbits around the sun. And the distance of the Earth to the sun, and Mercury to the sun, and Venus to the sun, and Mars to the sun, those ratios, those orbital distances, all fell within mathematical, predictable, harmonious relationships that we see in music theory. The cosmic chord, so to speak. This is a rendition of Pythagoras leading chants and music to celebrate the dawn. Another thing that we don't do anymore. Human beings have lost our connections with nature, with grand nature, and the grand celestial events that are really mind-blowing. The summer equinox, the winter equinox, the spring equinox, the solstices, the time of day when the sun first rises, which is a little different every single day, when the sun sets, when the sun is exactly directly above in the sky and it casts no shadow. All of these epoch, cosmic things used to blow people's minds so much that they would build giant monuments with huge effort, like Stonehenge, and huge temple setups that would align with the stars and align with the sun and align with the seasons. So when the sun rose in the spring equinox, it would shine down a channel of huge monstrous stones that weighed 50 tons each and shine a little light on a little thing on a pedestal somewhere that would show, we understand this principle, right? 10,000 years later, when our people see what they built and realized that, oh, these people understood that principle, understood the great celestial events, and they were building sacred monuments to the mind-blowing thing of that, you know. The stars on the heavens sing a music, if only we had ears to hear. Pythagoras. There is geometry in the humming of the strings. There is music in the spacing of the spheres. Pythagoras. Sort of the father of modern music. And every culture has got their musical tradition for healing and for altered states of consciousness. The Aborigines in, Australia are the closest we have to the most ancient indigenous people at the roots of all of societies. Their relationship to earth and other creatures is profound. We go mingle among them to try to get little pieces that drop off the table of what they know and what they experience. And those little pieces blow our minds. The Tibetans and bowls. Like I've said in the past, somebody was the first person to make a bowl and to rub it with a stick. And all the meditators in the monastery, their ears perked up and thought, whoa, that put me right into this meditation state that took me 20 years to get to. How did you do that? And that little device there, rubbing with the stick, turns out to be a super high-tech device for 4,000 years ago. High-tech device for centering you and entraining your brainwaves. As I said before, there's a pulsing within these bowls. There's a brainwave entrainment pulse coming out of these bowls. That's where the real work is happening, is the brain entrainment part of that. The sound and the quality of the sound based on the alloy of this metal is a call to centering, and the brain entrainment pulse within now has an easy time to take you somewhere. Chinese bells, these things are so big that you can stand inside of it. Chinese meditation gongs. Many cultures on Earth came up with gongs. China came up with gongs. India came up with gongs. The Chinese character for medicine and music is almost identical. Here's a gong from India with Sanskrit, 4,000 years old. I mean, wow. Pounding these instruments altered your state of consciousness immediately. Sound is the force of creation, the true whole. Music, then, becomes the voice of the great cosmic oneness, and therefore the optimal way to reach this final state of healing. And now, in the 21st century, we've got all these high-tech tools for managing sound, making sound from nothing, creating electronic oscillators that generate a sound, a sine wave, or a square wave, or a triangle wave, or a sawtooth wave, mixing those together and creating timbres. We can create fantasy instrument sounds that were never possible before in any reality in the past. We can manage sound, we can buff sound, we can Photoshop sound. We can spread sound in 3D. We can get super accurate with sound. We can do binaural beats with sound and change brainwave function and synchronize the hemispheres. So now the ancient drum beat is now a high-tech electronic controlled system for managing sound separate in each ear through a new invention called headphones, where all of a sudden, for the first time in our biological history, this ear can hear something that this one can't hear, that forces all this stuff to happen in the brain that was never possible before. Synchronicity of the hemispheres, which we know from research is one of the most highly desirable states of the brain. It's where the aha moment happens, it's where the problem gets solved. It's where the door opens to my creativity, to higher places of information that can come through now. It's me in some ecstatic kind of state that's very hard to get to. People have been trying to figure out how to get this state for millennia. And now we can put headphones on and flip a button and hit a play button and bang, binaural beats in music cause this to happen. It's unprecedented now. If we listen to binaural beat soundtracks and we cause synchronicity of the hemispheres over time, and we listen to them all the time, we're exercising a function that was never possible to exercise before. We're taking this to the gym. We're boosting an ability of being able to open the primal door, which connects me to the biggest information in the universe, where the problems get solved, where my aha moments happen, as more and more and more my regular operating state if I do this all the time. If we tune them specifically to your brain and not generic, then it gets more powerful, more mind-blowing, more doors open, more windows open to ever deeper places. Which brings us to the brink of a new science of consciousness expansion using sound. If we begin to align sound, vibrational frequencies, and octaves of those sounds with photons and light and color, and align it with electromagnetic frequency vibration rates so that they all align together and sync up together, then all of this just gets more powerful and more powerful. We play it through your body with low frequency transducers so that we activate the whole vibrational sense network in your skin, which lights up the posterior part of your spinal cord into key zones in your brain stem, right into the center of your brain and the thalamus, out to the cortex. We're lighting up the brain stem and the brain and the cerebellum, the emotional control centers, hippocampus and amygdala, the autonomic nervous system that controls everything. Now we're getting somewhere. Now we're delving into the science of deep level healing by awakening the internal physician program, which leads to the doorway of higher levels of consciousness and enlightenment. Here, go back. Here's a structure in a Joshua Tree, California, out in the desert. There's actually a Joshua Tree now, is a state park, huge zone of desert with these crazy growth formations. The Joshua Tree, like sort of like a cactus kind of a thing that has always had shamanic properties. But this device out there called the Integratron. The Integratron was built in the 50s by a guy named George Van Tassel. George Van Tassel was a contemporary of, he was a contemporary of Tesla. And Tesla was doing all of this work with high-frequency currents. And his high-frequency current work, where he would take an inert core, cylinder, an inert core, and wrap copper windings around it. And the number of windings per inch would be a step-up transformer for wall current from 120 to 500,000 hertz. And those levels of frequencies would be in tune with my body's cell processes and boost my cells to a super high energy state, a super high healing state. And this became a device called the high frequency current therapy device that was taught in medical school and used in hospitals and used in medical clinics, and was also portable units that doctors would take around with these blown glass vacuum tubes that these high frequency currents would go into the vacuum tubes so that you could apply it to the body. I used this for 40 years, this kind of technology. Back in the 20s, during the purges of the pharmaceutical companies, actually Carnegie Mellon, the Mellon family and the Rockefellers, they're the ones who initiated backing the horse of selling pills and eradicating all competition. So the big purges of the 20s, where they did a search and destroy mission for every competition to modern medicine and branded them as quacks or closed their schools down. Chiropractors went into a battle with them for 40 years that ended up at the Supreme Court, and the chiropractors won. And that opened the doors to all of these holistic therapies coming back. Did you ever hear about that? No, unless you heard it from me. They kept that quiet. One of the big landmark cases of the Supreme Court is the holistic forces winning against the medical forces and opening up the doors for naturopaths to come back, homeopaths to come back, acupuncture to be used again, osteopaths to come back. And they could no longer suppress you from being in practice with a medical doctor or being on a hospital staff or treating and healing people. Now, Van Tassel built this huge structure here. Yeah, I think it was 50 feet tall, 35 feet in diameter. Inside that dome is this huge dome structure, all made of wood. This entire structure, by the way, is all made of wood with no nails. There's no metal in this building at all put together with wooden pegs. So when you look at this dome, it's all wood, all made with wooden pegs. The floor is all made with wooden pegs. Down below this floor, and the ceiling, all done with wooden pegs until it comes to this area here, which is open to the sky. You can see the sky through here, and this is a metal cylinder open to the sky. Down under the floor here, so that's that dome up here, with you can kind of see a little bump here, which is the opening at the top with a metal cylinder. You can see that there's these aluminum metal tubes sticking out all the way around the circumference here. These metal aluminum tubes, and when you walk up closely, you can see that they're all wired together. There's wires connecting all of these together. And then on the ground floor, down underneath here, there's a central wooden column that's circular. It's like a big tubular column in the middle made of wood. And so when you walk into that room, it's a circular room. It's got a big wooden tube in the middle of that room, goes right up to the ceiling. And that wooden tube has got little wooden pegs hammered into it all the way around, all the way around, all the way around, all the way around, up to the ceiling, out across the ceiling in a big spiral. So it's going in a spiral, these wooden pegs in a spiral, all the way up that tube, all the way to the ceiling. And it continues all the way around the ceiling, all the way out to the end. And the majority of people look at that and go, what the heck is that? And what are these like tubes out here? And why is there an opening in the ceiling with a metal tube? Because this was a gigantic, the biggest ever Tesla coil. Those wooden pegs held the copper wiring that wrapped around that central column tube, went all the way up to the ceiling, and continued wrapping around on the ceiling, which would be underneath this floor, had these copper windings underneath this floor, and all of that bundled together into a giant cable that went out to a separate building in the back with a huge generator that filled a whole building. And that generator powered this giant Tesla coil. So now what you see is that all the wiring on that ceiling came out to these metal tubes, which were all wired together. And the wiring under the floor, down that column, came out to this sort of separate building where the generator was. You fire that generator up, and it increases this to 1 million cycles per second under the floor, attached to these tubes. And with this metal ring at the top, it created a giant spark gap. So anybody who was inside this chamber was now inside a massive, gigantic electromagnetic Tesla field, which amped up your whole nervous system and all the electromagnetic processes and all your cells, and in every system in your body that's electromagnetic, which is just about all of them. For what purpose? For healing, number one, but for turning your whole nervous system into a massive, giant antenna, where if there was a group of people in this room, which is why the room is so big, purpose was to align people's nervous systems together to the same frequency to create a massive electromagnetic mind link. That's what Van Tassel was up to. And I'm sure at the behest and the blessing of Tesla himself. I have experienced, I mean, I've got the portable doctor's unit that's been refurbished from a company in England, exactly as it used to be, full strength with the glass tubes that I used for almost 40 years in my practice. You apply the glass tube to an area like in your shoulders got a pain, and this purple electromagnetic kind of sparks are inside the glass tube. It connects to your body. You feel heat deep down inside your body. And it heals the tissue and takes the pain away. So it's sort of mind-blowing. There was another way of using this technology in hospital units where you would sit in a chair, hold onto two steel balls that were wired to a giant machine that stood 5 feet tall with big dials, and flip the switch, and now you are part of the circuit. And the doctor would ground you out by touching your body. And so all that field inside your body would ground out to his hand, into his body, and down to ground through his feet. That's how I first saw it. With a doctor, 95-year-old doctor in New York City called Dr. Rieger, who treated my wife's knee by just placing his hand on her knee and grounding it out and doing a 5-minute treatment. 5 minutes later, her knee is flushed and there's no pain. Not only is there no pain, there's no sensation. It was numb for an hour. And it was no pain for a month. Slowly started to come back. We went back for another treatment. That was the end of it. I asked him if I could be his apprentice. And he just chuckled and said, no, that's not how it works. If it's supposed to come to you, it will come to you. And it did. Years later, it came to me. And I incorporated it into my practice. So when I saw the Integratron for the first time, I knew exactly what was going on here. Even the guy who bought this place didn't know what it was for, what all this was about. So I got to explain it to him. You have no idea. You're using this nice dome enclosure space because it's got really cool acoustic properties, right? A sphere is the ultimate acoustic reflection, reverberation space. And even though this is an imperfect dome, it's taller than it is wide, it still has very cool acoustic echo patterns in there. So it's a really great place to do sound healing, sound baths and stuff like that. It's very cool. That's what it's used for now. But the people who use it had no idea what it was really all about. Music as medicine. The therapeutic potential of sound. Sound may be an overlooked tool for boosting well-being. Studies suggest that music can have positive impacts on mental and physical health. Duh. A 2022 systematic review and meta-analysis of 26 studies found that music interventions were associated with statistically and clinically significant improvements in mental health-related quality of life. Still, music and sound therapies are in large part artistic endeavors. Here we explore how artists create soundscapes that aim to positively impact the listener. So all of the power of how music has been used in music therapy with incredible outcomes is, it's not the same as what I'm talking about with sound healing with highly precise sound frequencies accurate to a few decimal points. This is somebody, a music therapy who's trained, a therapist who's trained to go to to hospitals and to nursing homes with their harp or their guitar or make music. And the music itself as combinations of vibrational frequencies in chord patterns that shift to other chord patterns that are also mathematical relationships to each other in a sequence of how chords work to make music, has a deep effect and a healing effect on people just in its own right. Powerful, amazing. Your brain is not a computer, it's a transducer. New theory of how the brain works, neurotransduction theory, might upend everything we know about consciousness and the universe itself. And I did a whole live stream on this at one point, or a significant part of one of my live streams. Excuse me. Where there were a series of PubMed articles that discussed what this is saying, that your brain is a transducer, that up to this point, when they talk about, we have neurons in the gray matter of the cortex generating electrical pulses, and the electrical pulses fire in synchrony with other with other neurons in waves of depolarization across the cortex, brain waves. The speed of those depolarizations are directly related to states of consciousness, beta, alpha, theta, delta. Whether the sweeps are 2 sweeps per second, or 5, or 13, or 25, is different states of consciousness. They've never completely understood the exact mechanism of how those electrical discharges take place. Now, they know that the initiating structure in the brain that starts the process is the thalamus. And the thalamus is, we look at this guy and we pull this guy apart. So here's the inside of the brain. So this is the cerebellum, which this is the brainstem, right? And this structure right here that you see, that is the thalamus. And there's one on each side, a right one and a left one. And as you can see, it's right in the center of the brain, like right here. And right underneath it is the hypothalamus. And the hypothalamus is the origin of the autonomic nervous system, right? So the thalamus is like these 2 round structures at the top of the brainstem. That's grand central station for receiving the signals up the spinal cord from all my sense organs, and then routing it out into the cortex for finer degrees of refinement of information processing and what to do about it. But also those 2 structures is the initiating pulse that causes the neurons to fire in the brainwave sequence. And what these articles were saying is that this electrical discharge that takes place in the neuron that goes down the axon, that reaches a spark gap, that either continues that going on the axon to the next neuron or not, is the electricity running down there, and the electricity that happens in the neuron is initiated by sound waves. Sound waves. Because the brain is not a computer, it's a transducer. A transducer is a speaker without a cone. A transducer makes sound. The transducers that I have in my sound tables and my sound chairs are specially designed low-frequency transducers to produce low-frequency sounds to activate the vibration sense network in the skin. And what they're saying by this article and others is the thalamus on each side. These round structures are transducers for initiating a sound vibration that causes a torquing of the membrane of the neuron, and that's got piezoelectric effect when you torque it, which means if you put pressure on a liquid crystal, which is what the cell membranes are made of in a neuron, and all the microtubules inside the neuron are crystalline structures that are designed to create piezoelectric discharges under pressure from a sound wave. So the sound wave comes out from the thalamus, goes to the neuron, distorts the cell membrane, pushes a piezoelectric effect, and it creates an electrical discharge that goes down the axon. But what's going down the axon is that acoustic transducer pressure wave. There's a pressure wave going down the axon, and at the leading edge of that pressure wave is distorting the cell membranes that flip them to a piezoelectric discharge. So the electricity going down the axon is at the crest of a wave of sound pressure. The brain is a transducer. The whole network in the brain, which appears to be electrical, that we're picking up from an EEG, is driven by sound waves, traveling from the thalamus into the neurons, down the axons as pressure waves that depolarize a piezoelectric effect. And if any of you could understand what I just said, blessings to you. I'll see if I can hunt up the previous live stream where I talked about this in more detail with a lot of illustrations so it makes it easier to understand. And I'll post that in the Discord channel. Stanford Medicine Magazine, Sound Research, Scientific Innovations Harness Noise and Acoustics for Healing. Everybody's jumping on this bandwagon now. National Library of Medicine, NIH, Eastern Integrative Medicine, and Ancient Sound Healing Treatments for Stress. Recent research advances. Stress is the ultimate cause of disease. Here we are again, NIH. Effects of singing bowl sound meditation on mood, tension, well-being. An observational study. But look who's doing this research now. There's funding behind this. Again, NIH, possible mechanisms for the effects of sound vibration on human health. Mind-blowing article. Forbes magazine. Think you've heard it all? New research into the science of sound proves otherwise. Psychology Today. The healing power of sound as meditation. Research suggests sound is a powerful tool to reduce pain, anxiety, and more. We already know the effect of just a simple Tibetan bowl. Rub that bowl. The sound quality centers me. The pulsing within that entrains my brainwaves to an altered state. Two birds with one stone. And that was like 4,000 years ago they figured that one out. Now we've got sophisticated tools for binaural beats and headphones and sound chairs and monitoring your brain waves and monitoring your nervous system on a computer screen to tune it to make sure it's at its max, that it's not just guessing anymore. Vibration and resonance. Fundamental principle underlying the theory of sound healing is that all matter vibrates at specific frequency, right? Each organ a different frequency, each vertebra a different frequency, each cranial bone a different frequency, right? Each chakra a different frequency, each meridian point a different frequency. You know, the autonomic nervous system itself has a frequency, and when you balance that, it balances all the other ones, so you don't have to play doctor down and finding frequencies for every single little thing when you can just use one frequency to wake up master control, and it will fix those. You can assist that process to speed up the healing by finding frequencies for each of this, as long as you've awakened the internal physician program that's working it from the inside, and you can assist from the outside. Now we're really getting someplace. Some think sound vibrations act to clear channels of transport within the cell, facilitating the movement of energy across the cell membrane and making it easier for cells to receive. To get a visual demonstration on how sound and vibration affects matter, visit the Simatics. Visit any Simatics website. Simatics. Patterns of sound showing in physical matter like water, sand. Simatics vividly demonstrates how sound influences matter and molecular structure. Water being a strong conductor for sound, imagine how sound affects your inner workings and how it can assist rearranging dissonance, which equals disease, into patterns of a natural state of coherence, as shown in these images of somatic patterns. In 1680, Robert Hooke, English scientist, architect, polymath, using a microscope, was the first to visualize a microorganism, was able to see the nodal patterns associated with modes of vibration of glass plates as he ran a bow along the edge of a glass plate covered with flour, and saw the nodal patterns, these cymatics patterns that later, here's how he did it. So this is a glass plate with flour on it, and he's bowing it with violin bow. And it wasn't just him. This was Stradivarius. People creating violins and musical instruments and cellos, right? A sounding board would put sand on the sounding board and play it with the violin's bow and watch the patterns and scrape this off and sand that off and bow it again and scrape this off and sand that off and bow it again. And then they'd put those wooden struts to strengthen, put the sand and bow it again, tuning the sounding board. Now we can do this with computer technologies. And that led to, Ernst Chladni, the German physicist and musician. His most important work was the Chladni plate with the sand on top, right? The Chladni plate. These were metal plates with sand on top. And every different frequency formed a different pattern. Later, that led to this guy, Hans Jenny, in the 60s, who did high-level scientific experiments with that. It's a little difficult to see from this photo here, but right there is the metal Chladni plate with the sand on it, with a transducer attached to the bottom. And these electronic instruments were tone generators, so he could dial up precise frequencies to play through the sand and form all kinds of different patterns associated with different frequencies. Every frequency had a pattern. He did a famous 16mm film, which is still available, called Simatics, produced by a British osteopath, Guy Manners, who I met in England back, back in the 80s. I went to England and I took a course at the Hygeia College of Color Therapy with the top expert in color therapy at the time, Theo Gimbel. So I was on this cool estate in Avebury, England, for a couple of weeks taking this color course. And just up the road was Avebury, the town of Avebury, which is a whole town inside of a giant stone circle like Stonehenge. Circle is so gigantic, the whole town is inside. Consider the body consists of 70% water, an excellent conductor of sound. You can look at disease as a form of disharmony, and there's no organ system in the body that's not affected by sound and music and vibration. Mitch Gaynor, MD. Now, Dr. Mitch Gaynor was a friend of mine. I knew this guy. He was a medical oncologist. He dealt with cancer patients. And he made himself a big name on the news with all kinds of interviews on ABC and CBS and blah, blah, because he was using Tibetan bowls to help heal his cancer patients and relieve their stress. And he wrote a few books. One of those books, The Healing Power of Sound, he devoted a whole chapter to me and biotuning. And I've been interviewed by countless people and have been in at least 10 books and other people's books on sound. Nobody gets it completely right. This guy got it 100% right. He really did listen and got it right. His description of my process of biotuning in the chapter in this book was remarkably amazing. As a side note, he has come to my office a few times. One time he brought his 12-year-old son. He had all kinds of plans for where he was going with this. He was pushing the envelope in the medical field, particularly for sound, and that the ancients were onto something and that we should be researching this. He was sort of the dark maverick of medicine, but a darling of the holistic crowd. He and I were both supposed to be giving a keynote on sound at the Global Sound Healing Conference in San Francisco, put on by David Gibson, another good friend of mine, who has the Globe Sound Healing Institute in San Francisco, and puts these things on every year or a few years. It's a big event. But he came to me, and so I was looking forward to seeing Mitch Gaynor again. And David Gibson came to me and said, Mitch Gaynor is called up and said he's sick with the flu. He's not going to be able to make it. So could you fill in for him and do some talk instead of him? I said, fine, okay. Later he came back and said, no, I think we're just going to cancel this, like too much and weird. And so when I got back from San Francisco, I was going to call him up and find out how he's doing, what's going on. Besides, I was looking forward to touching base with him, and it's a good excuse to say, how are you doing? And when I got back, the headlines, Mitch Gaynor had died. And I'm going, he died? He died of a flu? No. They found his car 2 miles away from his house on a back road, off to the side of the road with the lights on and the driver's door open, and he nowhere in sight. A few hours later, they found him back in the sort of the tree forest behind his house with a bullet hole in the back of his head. And they called it suicide. So he became one of 50 or 60 holistic doctors that year who died under mysterious circumstances, all of them with a cure for cancer that was not drugs or surgery. I hate to sound like a conspiracy theorist, but this was a damn friend of mine, and I was pissed off. You don't put a gun at the back of your head somehow and blow your own brains out and call it suicide. Anyway, excuse me for going down that track. A sound approach to advancing healthcare systems, the future of biomedical acoustics. How's that for a word? Biomedical acoustics. Sounds cool. Newly developed acoustic technologies are playing a transformational role in life science and biomedical applications, ranging from activation and inactivation of mechanosensitive ion channels for fundamental physiological processes to the development of contact-free, precise biofabrication protocols for tissue engineering and large-scale manufacturing of organoids. You know what they mean by that? They're talking about acoustic levitation. So they've gotten the acoustic levitation down so precisely now that they can guide cells into various positions in space. They can actually guide them up and down in any position they want to by having a speaker array. By turning certain speakers on and off or varying their volume levels, they can make something move around in various ways. Stanford University researchers are identifying acoustics that creates new heart tissue, a reawakening to the power of sound that we now have tools to take it further. This image below shows the cymatics or geometric patterns created in heart cells when applying various sounds. In bioacoustic sound medicine, it teaches us that sounds are imprinting every cell, and science continues to prove this ancient axiom. These are the patterns in heart cells. Medical studies at Stanford. Heart cells are among the most densely packed in the body. About 100 million fit into the space the size of a sugar cube. The compact structure crams the cells so close together that they can communicate with one another and beat as one. For tissue engineers, however, it poses a tricky hurdle. Pack the cells too tightly and some won't get proper nutrients. Too loosely and they can't coordinate a beat. By using acoustic signal that creates Faraday waves, scientists can influence the movement of heart cells to form precise patterns of heart cells. Wow. The future of biomedical acoustics. Acoustic mechanobiology. Using sound to open ion channels to change cell function. In vivo manipulation, which means in living cells, micro-robots, transducers, we're moving micro-robots around the body by levitating with sound waves. Point-of-care diagnoses, liquid biopsies, separation with sound waves, tissue engineering, moving things around, moving tissues, cells around with acoustic levitation. Mind-blowing. A, point-of-care diagnostics, biofabrication of tissue engineering, acoustic manipulation. This is what's happening in all of your cells, inside the fluid in your cells, when you're on a sound table with sound waves coming into your body. So, intuitively, we've known this. Intuitively, since the beginning of time of our cultures all over the planet, have instinctively been drawn to sound as a tool for healing, changing consciousness, transformational states. I myself ended up in that whole project with space sounds, sounds from space that have a deep effect on the unconscious mind. All of it, the whole sound engineering world, the concept of sound medicine, is not just physical, but it's sound medicine for the emotions, sound medicine for self-defeating belief systems, sound medicine for consciousness itself, the sickness of the soul, sickness of my spirit, being stuck in a belief system that has been added onto me, that I'm ordinary, that I'm nothing special, that I am not a being of light who's on the biggest journey of all time to find the true nature of my soul, that I have power when I open myself up and connect to the universe at large. And that's why we're here, to tap into the power of numbers, to awaken my connection with the deepest part of reality in a sort of a tribe of people who are linking themselves together, so we all lend energy to a pool that we all can dip into to maximize our connection with the universe in our own lives and to change the universe as a whole. And so here we go. Thank you all. My focus is weird. There's a couple of things I noticed in chat. First of all, we're talking about those of us who are doing this kind of work. If our work bears too much fruit, there's always a possible danger there. I'm sort of being hit on by trolls periodically. I've had my websites hacked. I've been attacked a few times that way. I've never had the guys with the black hat show up wanting to pick my brain about how to, change people's consciousness and whole continents from a satellite. But there was actually an example of that was last broadcast. That was on the esoteric sounds broadcast. When you go to the YouTube channel, there's the big screen with me doing my thing, and then off to the side there's the chat, and then down below that screen, other people can leave comments afterwards. And one guy essentially said, "I don't believe Dr. Thompson's got real space sounds. I think that's just a bunch of malarkey. He's a liar, and he's pulling the wool over your eyes, right? He's a fake, and please prove me wrong." So I answered him, that might be something interesting to go see. My answer to him was this big, long thing with, references to articles about the space sounds and this and that and everything all the way through it. There was somebody who asked a question about why am I doing a podcast on Discord? And I'm not doing a podcast on Discord. Discord is the place where we can all gather together and continue to talk to each other throughout the week and not be limited to just a little conversation we have here for an hour and a half. Another question about, can deaf people benefit from binaural beats and from sound healing? And the answer is absolutely yes. So if you're deaf in both ears, you can use bone conduction headphones to listen to my soundtracks that will drive it through bone conduction through a different mechanism. Deaf people on the sound table or the sound chair, definitely. Now you can hear everything straight through your cells in a completely separate mechanism than hearing. So once again, thank you all so much for being here with me and to keeping up with these broadcasts and to doing your part. Make sure you hit the like button so that we get more possibility of spreading this word out. Tell people what we're up to. All of us must know people who are like-minded. And until next week, be healthy and take care of yourselves. Be happy, and I will see you next week. I'll leave this chat sort of going for a little while. Then I'll close it down, and we can switch over to the Discord channel to continue any conversations we might have. Thank you all very much for being here.